I know are going to listen to this webinar later, and this will also be posted on the KDE website with the where the RFA is posted. That's also where we will be posting the Q&A responses too. So that's something else that we'll go over on the webinar. All right, so I think I've covered these things already about Zoom, and you guys have already done a good job of muting yourself if you're not talking, just to prevent some background noise, and already talked a little bit about how to use the chat. And please don't hesitate to reach out if you need any help with anything, if you're struggling with hearing or knowing how to manipulate any of the features in Zoom. All right. The objectives and goals of this webinar are to understand the vision of the Kentucky Network to Transform Teaching and how it relates to this opportunity for potential pilot districts, and clarify any of the questions you all may have about the application process, and hopefully make that an easy process and not a hurdle for anyone that's interested in applying for this opportunity. So I should mention, my name is Suzanne Farmer, and I'm a board certified teacher, and I serve as the Kentucky director for the Network to Transform Teaching. The Network to Transform Teaching is actually a national group that represents, at this point, 9 states and 2 large school districts that are shown on your screen now. The 2 large districts are Clark County, Nevada, and San Francisco, California. Albuquerque has a star because it had originally started as a large district and now is working as a state-level site. Kentucky is one of the original sites of the Network to Transform Teaching grant, and we are now in our 3rd year of that work with the national board. The Network to Transform Teaching is funded through a U.S. Department of Education seed grant and is funded to the National Board for Professional Teaching Standards. As I mentioned, Kentucky is one of the states that's a partnership in that work, and our local partnership in Kentucky is a really nice collaboration between the Education Professional Standards Board, the Kentucky Department of Education, and the Kentucky Education Association. And one of the questions that I've already received from the field is who are the existing pilot districts that are already working with us? And right now, the 2 pilot districts that we work with are Floyd County and Oldham County, and as pilot districts, and we're looking to add hopefully 4 more districts for next year. The vision of National Board and the Network to Transform Teaching work specifically is to make accomplished teaching the norm or the standard for improving teacher learning and practice for all teachers, not just those that decide to pursue board certification or those that are eligible with at least 3 years of teaching experience. And to better utilize instructional leaders to help support accomplished practice, to use their knowledge to support the professional learning of others, and to really develop better collaboration for learning communities based on standards of accomplished teaching, improvement cycles, and evidence-based conversations that are linked to student learning. And really, one of the ways that I picture this work and this vision is that in the past, a lot of the work that teachers went through when they became board certified was literally packed up in a box. And it was something that teachers pursued individually and wasn't something that was a part of the way that teachers learn in schools or learned with each other. So that was often something teachers do outside of school as something extra. And what we're really trying to do is to make that professional wisdom of what we know to be a tried and true experience to improve student learning and teacher practice is to try to make that transparent so that all teachers can benefit from that professional expertise, so that best practice isn't kept a secret, and that can be used to build capacity and improve the professional learning of all educators. Another real shift that's similar to that idea of unpacking that box and making professional wisdom transparent is the idea that we're trying to work from what has often been a very individual improvement practice for teachers that are deciding that they want to pursue board certification, to taking those ideas and practices of what's involved with the process of board certification and looking at what would it look like if we did these things to improve our school. Or how could we use these ideas and these resources, these practices to improve our district? So making those ideas collective, whether or not people decide to pursue board certification. Another piece, and this is a graphic that you all would have seen in the RFA, is this idea of an educator continuum. That we know that if we wait until teachers are ready to demonstrate that they're accomplished at that point in their career to really begin sharing some of these resources of board certification, some of these ideas and these practices, that we're going to miss a lot of teachers who are going to leave the profession before they even get to that point. And at this point, a reality is that many of our early career teachers are also facing some of the most challenging teaching situations, and just making sure that we're doing a better job of having a seamless, cohesive educator career pathway, so that we're really thinking about some of these practices as a way that we can work with higher education, support our early career teachers, support teachers to demonstrate that they're accomplished, and then really rely on the expertise of our teacher leaders to support the rest of that continuum, but also then ensuring that we're providing our teacher leaders with the expertise and the support they need to actually be effective in influencing and supporting other teachers. Some basics about the just an overview of the RFA is that the opportunity is for up to $50,000 for next school year. So funding could begin as early as July 1 if contracts are in place and budget approval through the National Board has been finalized. Something that I want to make sure is clear is that even if a grant is awarded, the budget that is submitted is still contingent upon final approval through a budget process with National Board. We have been tried to be as clear as possible about allowable and non-allowable expenses to ensure that that's a seamless process for people through that budget approval. And we can really expedite that to hopefully have contracts in place by July 1 for spending. We don't know if we will have the seed grant after the summer of 2018. Right now, that is our state agreement, ends in 2018 in the summer. However, National Board is applying again for another seed grant, but that does not automatically mean that there would be pilot school opportunity and district opportunities in the future. I haven't seen that application to know if that project description has changed. So right now we can only commit to a 1-year funding for new districts. Part of the agreement is that we want to not just learn about how districts can build systems to support the professional learning of teachers and improve those systems, but also what does that really look like at a school level. So part of the learning needs to take place at a few pilot schools, 1 to 3 pilot schools within a district. There is a resource I want to make sure that I call your attention to that is linked to the RFA, that is a school strategy resource that we are using right now with our pilot schools to help develop. They can choose ideas or strategies or create their own if there isn't one on that resource. It's a working document of what this improvement work might look like at a school level. There's also some roles that are defined in the RFA. One is a district sponsor, and the idea of the district sponsor is that that should be somebody that is involved with this work at some level, that can ensure that the work that's happening with this grant is in line with the vision of the district, and that can pretty quickly speak to ideas of, yes, that's something our district can do, and someone who has enough influence and authority at the district level that they can commit the district to decisions through that work. And then an improvement lead who's really more of a boots on the ground that supports this work, supports the pilot schools, and is really the one that is helping to implement these ideas at the system level at the district, but also then supporting things at the school level, and is in touch with how the goals that the district sets for this work, and also then conversations about how things are going, and really looking at some data with us. Then the larger piece is that as part of the Network to Transform Teaching, all of our work in this grant is organized in a networked improvement community, which is part of the Carnegie Foundation Principles of Improvement. And a networked improvement community is a space where it's not just encouraged for people to learn together, but it's really an expectation that we will share what's working and what's not working with one another, so that we can speed up our improvement across the country. So there are some expectations of what it means to be a part of a networked improvement community, and those are outlined in the RFA. I wanted to also make sure that at the end of the RFA, there's some resources that may be really helpful. If you want to know more about the Network to Transform Teaching, there is a document that is linked called The Problem We Seek to Solve. And this problem is the problem that National Board writes about in the SEED application. That's a larger problem of trying to ensure that every child, an assurance that every child has an accomplished teacher every day. And the theory that we believe that utilizing some of these practices and resources of board certification and applying them to local problems can really help us to solve that problem and to eventually make accomplished practice the norm. There's also a resource that talks a little bit more about what is the network, and the network that we work in for the Network to Transform Teaching. There are some resources if you want to know more about the National Board for Professional Teaching Standards. One that is especially exciting is a newly published explication of the 5 core propositions. The 5 core propositions have been in place with the National Board for Teaching Standards before they were even board certified teachers. And they are the 5 tenets that all of the work of board certification really rests on. So this is the foundation. It's considered the Hippocratic Oath for educators. That explication has just been revised for the first time since the 1980s, and is really it's that document is linked and is a nice read if you want to know more about what those 5 core propositions really look like in practice. The other resource there, Sustaining the Teaching Profession, is an article by Ron Thorpe, who is the former president and CEO of National Board until about 2 years ago when he passed. And that article really lays out a nice vision for how we can better prepare and support teachers to have a more well-defined and accomplished teaching force. Also, as the Network to Transform Teaching works with an improvement science approach with the Carnegie Foundation, it might be helpful to look at the 6 core principles of improvement if you're really curious about how we our theory of how we improve in this work, what those improvement cycles look like, the ideas of measurement for improvement rather than measurement for accountability. These principles might help for you to get an idea around what this work would look like. And also why we work in a networked improvement community. There's also some improvement resources linked on the National Board NT3 site. And then of course, it's always helpful to begin with the end in mind. So you may want to take a look at the scoring rubrics. The scoring rubric really is what we're going to be using to score our the RFAs that come in, the applications, and those are going to be double-blind scored, but the rubric will be how we will calibrate that scoring. And also there's a lot of definitions that may be new. So if you're not sure what the 5 core propositions are, there is a list of definitions at the end of the RFA that you might find really helpful to describe what is the body of knowledge of accomplished teaching, what is the architecture of accomplished teaching, and where can I find some of these things. So those are listed at the end of the scoring rubric. Also want to make certain that you're aware of some deadlines. Obviously today is the technical assistance webinar. Shortly after that, there is a deadline. If you have questions, those need to be submitted to me through email by February 21st at 4. The question and answers will be posted on the KDE website with the RFA by February 27th. The intent to apply, we're asking people to submit something by March 2nd. That is not a requirement to submit an intent to apply in order to apply for this grant. However, it would really help us to know how many scores that we need to have in place and trained to save the date to be available to help us to expedite those grant applications. Applications are due March 20th, and I should have put on here when we expect to have those scored and posted. Hold on, I need to double check. I think we're going to be able to move that up a week from when we had originally proposed that. So I believe on the KDE website, it still says that would be on or around April 17th, and it looks like we can move that up. And we're gonna aim for having that released by hopefully the 10th of April. Oh, and I should mention the applications are due March 20th, which is the big one. And we're using electronic submission, which should have been outlined in the RFA. I thought it would be helpful to go through each of the sections of the narrative. The first section of the narrative is really an analysis of your national board teacher situation and some capacity building in your district. So it's just really looking at an awareness of how many board certified teachers you have, and really an analysis of if you have any. It might be that you don't have any, and that doesn't mean that you get fewer points. This is really an analysis about where am I at now, and what is my plan to scale the number and influence of board certified teachers in the future. Also, if you're already using the body of knowledge of accomplished teaching to support teachers, then that's obviously a part of the conversation. But if you haven't, that's also not necessarily, doesn't mean that you will score lower. It's how would you plan to use the body of knowledge of accomplished teaching to support your new teachers, which brings up the question that you may have, which is what is the body of knowledge of accomplished teaching? And this work of the body of knowledge of accomplished teaching is actually still a theory and an idea that we are working through with this grant. That this work is not something that you would find on the National Board website. This is an innovative space where National Board is learning more about, through this grant in particular, how could these resources be used to help support all educators. So right now, our working theory is that these are the pieces that we believe are part of the body of knowledge of accomplished teaching. And we have people actually in Kentucky right now that are a part of that innovation to really experiment with and to consider how these tools and practices could improve professional learning. So one of those is the architecture of accomplished teaching, which looks a lot like an instructional cycle. But it's a little more sophisticated than a traditional instructional cycle. It's a double helix, and that double helix really represents not just the teacher and their reflection of instruction and their constant instructional cycle, but also how that should be very tightly aligned in that double helix with the impact on students, and that those conversations and reflections should be evidence-based. There's several metaphors. One, when teachers go through renewal, that the architecture of accomplished teaching is really a metaphor for the teacher's professional growth. And also right now, we have a lot of teachers that are going through a new component that was just released and revised in the new process of board certification, component 4, which is the effective and reflective practitioner. And in that component, teachers are required to have student self-assessment, and really looking at, if students are a part of self-assessment, then they are really actually using the architecture of accomplished teaching to reflect on their learning and the instruction that they need, and setting goals for their appropriate next steps too. So students are also a part of this process. We've already talked a little bit about the 5 core propositions, how that's considered the Hippocratic Oath for the teaching profession. Each certificate area and developmental area of board certified teachers has its own set of standards. And those standards are written by teachers, for teachers, and are revised periodically. They are not boilerplate, and they range in length from about 50 pages to about 100 pages. At the beginning of each set of standards, there's also some common language around the architecture of accomplished teaching and the 5 core propositions. And then each certificate area has its own set of standards that range. Some have maybe like 9, some have 10, some have 11. And they have different names, but everyone has standards that relate to things like knowing your students, and standards around assessment, and standards around equity and reflection and responsive instruction. Collaboration. But those are standards that can also be a part of helping teachers to really understand and to reflect on, understand what accomplished looks like, and then to also reflect on where they are and where they need to grow. We're also experimenting with this idea that, so there's 3 portfolio components. One, I mentioned component 4, which is the effective and reflective practitioner. That one is based on assessment literacy, and also then that teacher's professional responsibilities to continue to learn what is their professional need, how are they a part of a learning community, how do they base those decisions on how they need to grow on evidence that they're seeing from their students, and how does that then in turn impact their students after they have grown in those ways, so that their leadership is informed by student need. Also, there's a portfolio entry component 2 on differentiated instruction that is an analysis and case study of individual student work. And then the teaching practice and learning environment, which is the component 3 that focuses on really heavily on student engagement and practice, and uses videotape of instruction as the evidence. So it's a really in-depth analysis of instruction on video. 2 video submissions, 1 small group and 1 large group, and in different units over time. So as a part of those skills and practices, every portfolio component requires that teachers have an in-depth planning, analysis, and reflection. And we know that those things don't happen automatically, and that teachers need to be supported to be able to plan, analyze, and reflect at that high level. They also need supports in differentiation to an accomplished level, engagement, and this assessment, analysis, and leadership. So how can we use what those expectations are and those processes of those components to help to improve professional learning for teachers? How can those questions that those teachers are required to answer as a part of those portfolio entries then be used to help guide improvement in a school community or district? How can that be used to help improve professional learning and align professional learning for educators? Another resource that we have had a lot of success with in our initial pilot here in Kentucky is a resource called ATLAS, which is an acronym that stands for Accomplished Teaching Learning in Schools. And this is a resource that National Board has created that is a database of over 1,000 entries from teachers that have certified in the previous process of board certification with at least a 3.5 on a 4-point scale. These are the entries that include videotape and then the teacher's written commentary. And these are tagged for content standards, for deeper learning, in-task, the National Board Standards, the 5 core propositions. They're tagged and can be searched on content, on strategies, on keywords, age, and some demographic settings. So those cases can be used then to also improve professional learning and conversation. And so when we talk about how does this body of knowledge, how could this be used to improve the professional learning of educators, this is the culmination of what we mean by that body of knowledge. The second part of the narrative is a section that really is asking for the district to make a connection to local needs, goals, and resources. So while the National Board has explicitly laid out the problem that they are trying to solve, we want districts to consider what is the problem we're trying to solve and how could this work help us to do that. How does this work align with your vision? And how will this work help you to meet the need of high need students? So one of the questions that we've received already is, what does it mean for a student to be high need? And we want to leave that for you to determine. So we are, if you can make a case about what the data is telling you in your district is a high need of your students, then that's what we're asking for. We're not asking for a certain demographic. For instance, we already know that Kentucky as a state meets National Board's criteria for high need, and that we have over 60% of our students as a state that qualify for free and reduced lunch. So we work with other states where they define high need as 40% of the students being free and reduced lunch, and our state on average well exceeds what's considered a high need situation. So poverty could be something that you look at for high need. It could be that you're looking at students that are, you've noticed that there's an achievement gap or an opportunity gap with a certain population. Or it could even be that you have a need on a content area. So if you have questions about that, please don't hesitate to ask. But we certainly don't want to limit your consideration of what high need is and to try to make it a one-size-fits-all scenario. You may also want to target, this may be a place where you target some specific schools if that feels like a good solution locally. The third section of the narrative is really looking at some investment in sustainability. We're fully aware that 1 year of money is not going to be enough to create a system that will last forever. So we're really looking at an understanding of from the beginning of how you plan to sustain this work in the longer term, and to really build some capacity for that in your district through some support systems for your teachers and leaders. And how will you balance this work with any upcoming challenges and initiatives so that it doesn't get lost? Also looking at, because we are a part of a networked improvement community, and we know that it's really important for us to communicate what's working and what's not across our different settings, is how do you plan to share within and beyond your district? How do you plan to collaborate outside of your district walls? And how will that help improve your implementation? All right, and last, the last section of the narrative is budget. Considering here a part of the sustainability, efficiency of spending, of course, but also what local resources do you plan to take advantage of that will support your plan, which do not have to mean funds. There is not a matching funds requirement, so in-kind time or other resources can be a part of your consideration, but how do you plan to best utilize your local resources that you do have access to, and to consider in your budget a balance between spending some of that money to help with district system improvement, but also how you plan to support that the work that we would need to be learning from some innovations at pilot schools. And at this point, I'll open it up for questions if there are any, but also post my email address, which is also in the RFA. And a reminder that if you do have questions, the deadline to submit those is February 21st, so that the answers to those questions can be public for all potential applicants. Yes. Okay, so there's a question in the chat box. Can the grant be used to pay for professional development? And that is a question that I've actually already passed on to National Board to ensure that I'm not misspeaking. We have our pilot districts now. They both are actually using some of the funds to pay for professional development. There was a question that came in from a district that wanted to know that, let's say that they wanted to use the funding to pay for some professional development that would perhaps be like things that might be aligned to this idea of the body of knowledge. So maybe something around, let's say, assessment literacy that would benefit all teachers, not necessarily candidate support. Candidate support is a place where it gets tricky. So if it's just professional development for people that are candidates, that's where the answer might be no. But if it's professional development to build the capacity of your teachers to be more accomplished, let's say this is a professional development that, of course, we can't double dip and pay teachers during their school day or for their regular contract hours for that work, but we could look at that could be definitely an allowable expense. The answer I got from National Board is, of course, that would need to be a pretty tight connection with your aim as a district and your ideas for change, your solution, so that it's not a random professional development that doesn't feel like a real connection to your theory. Does that answer your question? Okay. So similarly, teachers could receive a stipend to attend meetings or professional development outside of contract days and hours. Yes. So one of our districts right now, one of our pilot districts, is paying teacher leaders a stipend to support the professional learning of peers. So that can be a part of an unapproved budget. Again, you know, it would have to be a connection with your solution, but yes, teachers can receive stipends for their leadership to support this work, or for professional development hours outside of their contract days. In fact, last summer, the improvement science training, which is one of the, I had hoped to have a few more answers before the technical assistance, before this webinar, about what the improvement science training will look like this summer. And unfortunately, I won't know the details on that training until probably a month from now. But last summer, National Board paid the teachers that came to that training a stipend for their time. So it is, National Board, just on principle, is going to want to pay teachers for their extra time. And yes, substitutes can be another allowable expense. I know that, again, like you could use that for some peer learning. You could use that for opportunities for to visit other sites to do some learning, or even for some mentoring and peer observation. No, there is not a minimum or maximum amount of teachers required to pursue board certification in a school district under the grant. There is not an accountability with that you would have to have a certain number of teachers decide to pursue in order to be funded or to stay funded. We hope that if the district is going down this route, that that would then be seen as a priority for the teachers in the district, that this is something that the district values. But we also have a lot of theories about, if we make this a part of the work that teachers do, that they're naturally going to feel more prepared, and that it's not going to feel like an extra lift, that this is something that they have to pursue outside of school. National Board is based on the tenet that board certification is voluntary and should always remain voluntary. So we certainly don't want to require that teachers pursue board certification. One of the things I forgot to mention that you will probably see in the rubric, the scoring rubric, is there's this idea in some of the states that we work with, that they have developed National Board Professional Development Schools, which is something that we're going to be starting in Kentucky hopefully next year. The idea of a National Board Professional Development School, the way we plan to implement it in Kentucky, is a little bit different than some of the ways our colleagues have done that. But let's say that I'm a principal of an elementary school, and I realize that a real focus of our professional goals and learning as a school and improvement really is reliant on being able to differentiate better for our students. And differentiation, let's say, is the focus of our school. Then the idea being that Component 2, which is a portfolio-based part of board certification, which really is about differentiation. If I then made the work of Component 2 a part of our professional learning as a school, then if teachers decided to submit Component 2, they'd already really done a lot of the work for that, and they built the professional muscle to be able to do that. However, it would not be a requirement for teachers to submit Component 2. It would be that as a school, even if those teachers decide not to submit for whatever reason, they still would have the expertise and the skills in hand, understanding of what those components are. We hope that districts, part of the improvement science training is helping districts and schools to set some goals for themselves about what would be a good measure or an aim for how many teachers might decide to pursue board certification. We understand that part of that work of the improvement science training is really shifting mindsets in education, which typically improvement and measurement are really seen almost as an accountability model because of the world that we live in. And in improvement science, there's a difference between assessment for and measure for improvement versus measure for accountability. So it's okay to have a moonshot goal and to not achieve it. There's not going to be an accountability that you've set a goal that a certain number of teachers are going to pursue board certification and they don't. That's where the learning happens. So why do you think they didn't? And perhaps it's just a matter of timing. Maybe it's a good thing that they didn't pursue yet because maybe there's more foundational work that needs to happen first. We will be awarding, we hope, 4 districts for next year, 4 new ones. So we have a continuation with the existing 2 districts, and we have budget from National Board to support 6 districts next year, a total of 6. So we can add 4 more. No. So the district sponsor is not required to attend the improvement science onboarding. It's really training primarily for the improvement leads and the pilot schools. So the district improvement lead and then some staff from the pilot schools. Ideally, the principal would attend and a couple of other staff, or at least that's how it was arranged last summer. So I don't want to speak too much out of turn about what that will look like this summer. But realizing that the district sponsors are often a superintendent or somebody at a high level position, it can be very difficult to manage that with their calendar, that's not a requirement. But of course, if anyone from that district leadership wanted to attend that training with the improvement team, would be absolutely encouraged to do so. There was another question that I had in my head that now I have forgotten. If you all have questions, keep them coming. I'm going to try to think and try to remember what it was that I thought of that might be. There was another thought I had that I thought might be helpful. Now I can't remember. Oh, I know what I was going to mention. That I hope that everyone, I want to make it clear that even if you go through the hard work of submitting an application and it's not chosen, please know that our grant philosophy in Kentucky with this work has strongly been that we are certainly not limited to collaborating and supporting our pilot districts. And we currently are working with a lot of districts that are not funded through our grant and supporting some learning and collaboration across districts that are not funded as pilot districts. And so if you go through this hard work and you're like, oh no, I really wanted to do that work, please know that to reach out to me, and that I will also continue to reach out to anyone who applies with opportunities to continue this work, even if your application is not chosen. One of those ways could be as a professional development school, National Board Professional Development School, and there will be plenty of other opportunities through our Atlas pilot, and we have a body of knowledge work group that's already working through some of these ideas too. So that was the one other thing I wanted to make sure to mention. Are there any other questions? All right. Well, don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions in the future. And thank you for attending. I hope that this has been helpful, and that you know where to go to get some of those resources to answer some questions that you may have if you want to dig in a little more to some of this content. And good luck. I look forward to your applications. I hope that you all apply. Thank you.